Hey everyone, Sari here, and welcome back to another week of Anima Season defense matches. I didn't make any changes from the previous Anima Season. The defenses held up really well overall, and I wanted to wait until CYL before considering any major updates. The layout is tricky to attack into safely, thanks to the combination of near and far save, while also being dangerous to bait, thanks to Rashot and Dollywood. Having a second dancer helps the team avoid being stranded by isolation, and two sources of ground orders helps keep the team's movements difficult to predict. I am actually quite happy with how Rashot's new kit has worked out. She's very difficult to tank, thanks to the combination of impact and sweep, and she ends up being a really great tank buster. This actually ended up being one of the rougher weeks the defense has had since I put it together earlier this year. While we didn't end up losing too much lift, there were several failed defenses over the course of the week. I'm not too worried about it yet. Even if I don't update the defense after CYL, it's held up really well so far, and I'm not sure one off week is enough to say it needs a revamp. So let's get to the first match. This match was a nice way to start the week. They brought along a pretty solid safe ball, using Edelgard and a Valentine's Fae, together with a Flame for the damage reduction, and backing it up with a bonus weak Clawed to help snipe anything that the safe armors can't handle. I do think Distant Counter's a bit of a strange pick for Edelgard here. With Fae supposedly covering the team from any ranged attacks, she shouldn't actually get any value out of it. It would be much better off with a different skill. They get things started right away, moving Flame up to take out the Panic Manor while setting up the armors behind her. Unfortunately, they ended up leaving Edelgard a little exposed, and Dollywood rallies forward and gets danced, and can attack into her. He can't finish her off in one round, but without Pulse Smoke, she can't stop the Gale Force, and that's enough for Dollywood to finish her off. Rashot moves in and gets an easy sweep on Fae. And then gets danced and can do it again. She can't really finish Fae off on her own, but it's alright, she's not taking any damage back. And even though the rest of the team can't actually attack in this turn, it's enough for them to surrender and move on. This match was interesting and a little odd. They brought along a fallen Edelgard as their frontline carry. She's pretty effective at that, and if the defense team doesn't have the right tools, she can tank her way through most things she runs into. Backing her up with a Brave Lucina is what makes this a bit of an odd choice. She does get Special Fighter from her native beast skill, so the breath effect from Lucina doesn't really do too much for her. She still does provide a solid chunk of stats though, and having Raisin on the team, along with Naga, makes it pretty easy to let Edelgard transform even on the first turn. They get things started right away, but they might have forgotten to break this Panic Manor, which makes this Edelgard a lot more vulnerable to, well, just about anything. Dollywood gets Rally and Dance to move in first and pull her a little further forward. And once she's in range of her shot, things go pretty badly for her. And Ceres can step in to finish her off. We don't end up getting any more knockouts this turn, but losing Edelgard's enough for them to surrender and move on. This match was the first loss of the week. They brought along a pretty nifty collection of beasts and dragons as their offense team, starting with a fallen Edelgard and backing her up with a very solid pirate Tybarn and a bonus week Niffle. It's an interesting team. It's not really too Gale Force focused, even though both Edelgard and Tybarn do have it available. And I do think that the extra punching power of Bonfire can help them break through some of the more problematic targets that a pure Gale Force team might run into issues with. They get things started pretty quickly here, sending Edelgard forward to attack into our Edelgard, before having everybody pull back out, and enduring this initial turn to get the defense out of position. Sadly, Eliwood actually attacks from the wrong side of Edelgard here. And even though he survives this, he can't get a Gale Force, and he actually pulls her to safety. With the defense out of position, it's pretty easy for Tybarn to pick up a knockout on her shot, since our Edelgard doesn't quite reach her. And meanwhile, their Edelgard can attack into ours again, and then finish her off with a bonfire.
Crumble to ash.
They can finish off Eliwood too, now that Edelgard's down. But they might have forgotten that Cirrus is a little bit spooky here. Because even though Tybarn can knock Mirabilis out and get away with a Gale Force, Plumeria is left very exposed, and Cirrus picks up an easy knockout. From there though, it's not so easy for the team to get much done. Felix sadly can't actually reach Tybarn from here, and Dorothea gets baited into attacking Edelgard instead of dancing Felix. If she hadn't been able to do this much damage to Edelgard, she would have danced Felix from the defense tile, which would have let him jump over and take out Tybarn. As is, they can start cleaning things up pretty easily from here. Niffle can attack into Cirrus without too much of an issue, and once her attacks are disabled and health cut in half almost, Tybarn can move in and finish the job. From here they're just stalling while they get to her Aether pots. Felix really can't do much once his kit's offline, since he has no allies left. And they can just kite him around. Although he does end up being a bit of a pain for them here, just with his movements. And they end up having to take 50-50 to get to one of the pots, and don't actually manage to get the second one before they close out the match. So, I'm not too worried about this loss overall. It does hurt a little to see two back-to-back failures like this, but it can happen. They brought along two different Edelgards for their team and backed them up with a bonus week legendary Claude. I think the three of them make a pretty solid core to work with. The two Edelgards are fantastic frontliners, and Claude and the Fallen Edelgard both have really effective player phases as well. and the combination gives them a variety of strategies they can apply to whatever team they run into. They take a turn here just to let the fallen Edelgard transform before they get things started. And once they do, they can dance her forward and attack into our Edelgard. She can't quite finish Edelgard off with the bonfire here, but she does enough damage to pretty much cripple her. Unfortunately for Edelgard, Rashot is very much able to disable her kit with one attack before getting danced to attack their other Edelgard. This second attack doesn't really accomplish much, unfortunately, since nobody else can really follow through on it. And nobody else is going to be able to reach that Edelgard this turn. Eliud attacks in here, and the dance and the panic out of Eliud is enough for Ceres to finish their Fatal Guard off.
My path ends here.
It does hurt a little to see the team line up perfectly for that Bolt Tower hit.
No mercy.
And their brave Edelgard can finish Rashad off without any real problems. They pull back here, and sadly, Eliud rallying forward ends up getting Dorothea baited into attacking Altina.
Goddess, guide me.
Being able to survive one attack, though, means that Altina doesn't get a Twin Blades when she tries to Vantage here, and that means Ceres can finish her off.
But how?
They decide to keep going here, and, well, at this point it's pretty easy to start cleaning things up. Edelgard can finish off Edelgard, while Claude takes down Ceres without any problems. And they can even send Edelgard forward to finish off Eliud as well. Felix can't really get a whole lot done to Edelgard, sadly. And Mirabilis actually does just enough damage to get herself baited into attacking and get knocked out. And like the last match, at this point it's just about kiting Felix while they pick up the pots. Even with a bonfire, he can't really do much to brave Edelgard on a defense tile. And once they pick up the second pot, Claude can close out the match.
Leave. Now. Do I look merry? Ha!
It was nice to bounce back from 2 failures with a success. And they brought along a very impressive maxed out Brave Edelgard to headline their team. I think she's an extremely strong near save bodyguard, especially for a Mirror Stance Nullsea Disrupt Micaiah. And backing the two of them up with Fjorm for some isolation support is a great way to avoid them getting overwhelmed in a single turn. I do think this combo works very well. I've been using something similar with Zelkius and Guinevere for a while now, and it's been very effective for me. They take a few turns to set up here, just clearing out structures in front while they figure out their approach. I'm not sure if they were planning to try and have Micaiah attack into Felix at first here. But they end up setting up for an isolation on Mirabilis instead. And then smite Micaiah forward to snipe Eliwood. And once they've done that, they dance her, pull her back, and retreat. Unfortunately, pulling Plumeria back there gets her just out of range of Edelgard's save area, which lets Ceres get danced and pick up a very easy knockout.
I knew it.
And even if the rest of the team doesn't make it in range, that's enough for them to surrender and move on. This match was the first clean loss of the week, and as much as it does sting, I can't be too upset when they brought along a maxed out Black Knight to the field. It's fun seeing him at this level, and they also backed him up with another Micaiah. This one's using a lull instead of Milcy Disrupt, which works out really well as long as you're not running into any dazzling effects that she has to worry about. And they're backing them up with a full set of 4 mythics to boost their stats. A lot like the last team, this is a very effective combination, and honestly I think it works really well into a variety of setups as long as you approach it correctly. They take a turn just moving into position here, before moving Micaiah forward, and just planting feet. This ends up working out quite well for them. Eliwood moves into attack, and, well, even though he doesn't tank the Black Luna here, he can't really get much done with Black Knight. Felix, meanwhile, can't quite survive Micaiah's counterattack. With a little more survivability, he might have actually been able to finish her off, but not quite here. And, well, Edelgard getting danced forward to attack into the Black Knight is not ending well. And sadly, Rajat ends up moving last here. If she'd actually gone earlier in this match, it would have let Felix take Micaiah out. But they planned it out pretty well. And Rajat doesn't get to do her job before everything else happens. At this point, it's pretty easy for them to clean things up. They smite Altina over and have her take down Rajat, before getting Twin Blades and effective damage to finish off Ceres. Micaiah has no problems taking down Eliwood. And then they move in. I'm not sure if they intended to finish the match here without picking up any of the Aether pots. And it's a little odd if they did, since this match actually happened only about halfway through the week. But Altina cleans things up pretty easily in the enemy phase. This match made the 3rd Micaiah match in a row, and this team went back to a Brave Edelgard to back her up. It's really great to see an Edelgard maxed out like this with summoner support and everything, and the Micaiah is equally maxed, with the summoner support as well. Deflect Magic is an interesting seal to give her. I'm not entirely sure what it's aimed at. I can't imagine Reinhardt threatens her too much, but it might help her survive Catria setups. They're backing the two of them up with the Flame for extra damage reduction, along with the Mythics. And I can't see this team having too many problems handling a lot of different things they run into. They get things started right away, using their movement skills to flip Micaiah forward onto the defense tile, and wipe out Felix. I think, though, that they may have underestimated Rajat here. Even with Nullsea Disrupt, Mirror Impact means that Micaiah is not going to get very much done to Rajat. And with two dancers to back her up, she'll eventually carve her way through Micaiah's health. And then one more dance to round things out. And down goes Micaiah.
So this is death.
Edelgards rallies forward here, but there aren't any dancers to help him actually reach Edelgards, so Cirrus is the only one who gets to attack. And she doesn't really get too much done. But losing Micaiah is enough for them to surrender and move on. This match, while it did hurt a bit to see, was pretty impressive in terms of just how degenerate it gets. They brought along two different Lynjas, one of them with an Impact Pegasus Carrot Iotes and Attack Defense Rain for her kit, which is a really interesting idea, and I think it's a good way to help her survive a combat with an enemy armored unit, or just about anything, really. Which lets her get into Wings of Mercy range and set up the chain of the rest of their entire team, including two different +10 Plumerias and a +10 Reagan. This is probably one of the more degenerate offense strategies I've seen, and I'll be honest, the only reason they actually ended up winning this was because of the Pegasus Carrot on the Lyn here. Although one of the other armor effective daggers would have worked as well. And even with all of this, she actually barely secures the knockout on Felix. Of course, once she does, it's easy enough for them to start sweeping through the rest of the team. With Wings of Mercy enabled and now Dorothea out of the way, their entire team is online. And they have exactly 9 actions on the team to work with. Once the Lyn starts self-dancing,
Go for it. This is it. Yes. What she said.
and they can carve their way through Eliwood. The chip damage means that Edelgard really doesn't get a chance to survive either.
Going to stop you.
And then Rajat goes down,
You're a wonder.
and the last few actions come through to let them pick up both Aether pots and close out the match in a single turn. It was very clean overall, but it also meant that beating them on the rematch was extremely satisfying. It was nice to have a successful defense after that last one, but this one was a little strange. They brought along a pretty standard Farsafe Brave Hector, and have him backing up this maxed out Fallen Julia. I really think that they meant to have near save on Hector here, since it should actually be a very solid safe triangle with Julia on the front and Flane supporting them both. But Julia really doesn't need protecting from ranged attacks, and well, she'd much rather have a melee bodyguard. They take a few turns moving into position here, just clearing out some of the forward structures and finding the right angle to approach. I do think in the end that this was actually just a mistake on the team skills, whether they locked it by accident or didn't switch the skills before the match. Because the way they set up here, I think they actually expected to have near save equipped on Hector. As is, though, Eliwood gets to rally forward and gets danced, and can attack Reagan.
This is it for you.
The damage reduction from Flane actually keeps her alive through the first hit,
Not good enough.
which really just means that Eliwood gets to Gale Force and pick up a second knockout on Flane.
Mother, soon.
Felix, meanwhile, gets to attack into Hector, who can't really do too much back to Felix, thanks to the defense tile. And while Rashad does get danced forward, she can't quite finish Hector off here. Even with that, though, losing those 2 units is enough for them to surrender the match and move on. This match was a fun one at almost the end of the week. They brought along a fallen Edelgard and backed her up with a Dew Micaiah. It's an interesting combo, especially with Windsweep on Micaiah and a Fume for isolation. Micaiah can usually pick off or put a dent in any armored cavalry units that might give Edelgard trouble, while Edelgard herself is an excellent frontliner. And of course, isolation support helps slow down any responses the enemy team might have. Unfortunately, I don't think they spotted the increased threat range at the start of the turn here, which means that Eliwood rallies forward, gets danced, and takes Micaiah out to start the fight.
Till death do us part.
He gets to Gale Force as well, which means he can go after Reagan next,
Not good enough.
and secure 2 easy knockouts at the start. The rest of the team can't get in range thanks to Fjorm, but that's not the worst. 2 knockouts on turn 1 is already great. They have Edelgard take a shot at Eliwood and then use her Gale Force to bonfire through Saros.
I am absolute.
Ashura, meanwhile, can finish Eliwood off. And I think at this point they were just counting on Edelgard to be able to tank her way through the rest of the team. Things don't quite go according to plan, though. Rashad jumps over Felix to take a pretty safe shot at Edelgard, which gives Felix the opportunity to jump forward and snipe Plumeria.
I knew it.
Edelgard herself is a bit of a sitting duck for her shot once she's starting to get danced. And once she's slow enough, our Edelgard can jump in and finish the job.
My path ends here.
And then she gets danced, and goes forward to secure 1 more knockout on Ashura.
I won't back down. My end?
And from here, there's really nothing they can do, so they surrender and move on. This one was the actual last match of the week, featuring Wylia, who brought along a maxed out Farsave Brave Hector as the headliner of the team. Pretty standard build, really, and backed him up with a near-save Edelgard and a Flame for the extra damage reduction and defenses. This Naga build is actually really cool. I might actually end up giving mine a refinable breath at some point to help boost her defenses. And combining Sabotage Attack with a Phantom Red Seal is a great idea. She takes a turn here, just clearing out the front of the map and letting Edelgard transform, before moving into position to start the fight this turn. Eliwood rallies forward and gets danced, but unfortunately, even though he does get to attack Edelgard directly, he can't really get a whole lot done here. Felix can attack into Hector, but neither of them really gets to do very much to the other here.
Prepare to die!
Rashad ends up moving last, and she does get to take a solid chunk out of Hector. But it's not enough to finish him off this turn, and nobody else can reach them. The first turn honestly went really well for them. Hence, Hector can move over to take Saros out here. The effective damage from Naga does a lot at that point. And Reagan can take out Eliwood. And since Hector got to clear his Fatal Smoke, they can heal him back to full health with Flame and Dance. Unfortunately, Rajat did not get handled last turn, and since she can attack Hector from outside of Flame's damage reduction range, she can actually take him out in 2 rounds of combat. Sadly, Dorothea gets baited into attacking Naga here. Rashad's not in range to be danced, and we don't have any rallies left to help encourage a dance, so it leaves the team pretty wide open for this turn. Edelgard has no problems taking out Rajat now that she's not being protected by our Edelgard. And they bait Dorothea further forward, while Edelgard distracts everything else. Our Edelgard isn't really meant to be able to handle fallen Edelgards, and she does survive a couple of rounds of combat, but she really doesn't get much done here. From here, things are pretty easy to start cleaning up. Reagan can take Dorothy out of the picture without any problems. And while it takes a couple of rounds to charge Bonfire, Fallen Edelgard can eventually take our Edelgard down. From here, I think she was setting up to secure the Aether pots before closing out the match. Edelgard can bait Mirabilis into attacking pretty easily, and without ground orders active or any allies to work with, Felix isn't really too much of a threat. She can smite Reagan forward and get ready to pick up the pot next turn. But I think she might have overestimated Felix's ability to survive. here,
Face your
since his entire kit's actually offline without an ally, and Edelgard finishes him off. Overall, even though the defense did have some bumpy moments this week, I think it's still holding up pretty well. I haven't decided yet whether or not I'm going to really experiment, right away at least, with the new CYL units on defense, but I am seriously considering it. Erica seems like she'd be a great fit for this layout, actually. And I'd like to try out Gatekeeper as well, since he'd do a great job of shutting down Wings of Mercy approaches. But we'll see if I can manage to fit them in. I do have a Discord link in the description if you'd like to hang out and chat, and there's also a Patreon page there if you'd like to help support the channel. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the video, good luck with your own matches, and I'll see you next time.